Russia will, quote, stop in a moment if Ukraine meets its terms. So what are Russia's terms? The Kremlin says it insists on neutrality for Ukraine, meaning Ukraine will not be joining NATO. Ukraine will not be joining the European Union. In theory, I would say Ukraine is a sovereign country. So in principle, I wouldn't be for Russia dictating what Ukraine could do. But as an end to a war, I could make peace with Ukraine giving Russia what it wants, which is it changing their constitution to pledge we will not join NATO, we will not join the European Union. I don't want to say okay with that, but I could accept that for this to end. The other demand is for Ukraine to recognize the breakaway regions, the Donbas regions that Putin recognizes independent and separate from Ukraine as independent, and the loss of Crimea, which Russia obviously annexed many years ago. So those two, before we get to the third one, which I think we both are against, my thoughts on the first two are, in theory, I would want Ukraine to be able to decide if they want to join NATO or European Union. I'm not a fan of NATO, to be clear. NATO has violated its promises to Russia.
Absolutely has. Yes.
And recognizing Crimea and these separatist regions, if it means ending this war, I'm okay with that. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I'm not a fan of NATO either. I think NATO has been absolutely problematic in the buildup to this. Regardless of what people think about, criticizing Russians' actions right now, and they should be criticized. This is an imperialist war, aggressive action that Putin is engaging in. That doesn't mean that there isn't a history there in which other folks have also made poor decisions or done bad things, including, Nuland in the 2014 coup. I'm recognizing that. So both things can be bad. I do think recognizing the Russian separatist areas, I'm okay with that. I think a lot of the folks that live in those areas are obviously okay with that. It's complicated. That doesn't mean everybody that lives there does, but I think that would be acceptable. What's crazy to me right now, though, is the next item.
So the next item is for Ukraine to demilitarize. Russia will finish demilitarization of the country. That's like not knocking on their door, bursting through their door with a machete, fucking them up, the person, and then
yourself,
and then saying, "All right, I'll leave, and trust me, I won't come back, but you can't have any locks, security system, anything." So that's batshit crazy. And Tina and I already said there is context. Russia does have a right to be very angry and threatened by NATO's eastward expansion, basically since the fall of the Soviet Union. That right does not give them credence to invade another country and kill God knows how many people at this point.
That's right.
Why
people understand he's bombing civilian areas. That's not hyperbole. That is absolutely the case. The gal that I interviewed in Mariupol, we can no longer get a hold of her. They've been bombing Mariupol for 2 days now. Last we talked, she was collecting water in a rain barrel because they've had no utilities for many days now. She's running out of water. So, this is aggressive and wrong. It's immoral. I just don't understand how that's debatable to anybody, especially if you say that you are an anti-imperialist or an anti-war person.
Well, I think you phrased it well, and this goes well beyond Russia and Ukraine to so many topics in politics. It's become a team sports game where you have to either be absolutist on one team or absolutist on the other. And if you're anywhere in between, or you say no, two things can be true at the same time, also called nuance, which is not really favored on platforms like YouTube, then you're screamed at. But the reality is, we are not CNN. We're not like, hey, pom poms for the Ukrainian president, and he's all this, and Russia has no right to feel threatened. This and that, they do. But you could have a right to feel threatened without committing a war that's murdering innocent civilians. By the way, there are Russian citizens that are also being punished now.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. Yeah.
Right. So to me, all right, you want Ukraine to recognize Crimea as Russian and the separatist regions as independent. Fine. You want Ukraine to pledge they're not going to join NATO, change their constitution that they're not going to join NATO, that they're not going to join the European Union. Fine. But asking a country that you've just invaded and are killing its citizens, put down your weapons, trust us, we won't come back,
is insane.
I don't know, like forget the morality of that. I don't know any country
that would agree to that. Yeah.
That would agree to demilitarize when in response to
invaded. Yeah.
Yeah. And also it wasn't in this article, but there was other reports that Putin and Russia were part of their offer was that the Ukrainian president could become like president pro temp, like basically a symbolic position, but they would put in place their own prime minister, i.e. a puppet. So I also don't know how that happens, because then it's not Ukraine, it's just a puppet government for Russia. So, to me, I respect differences of opinions, but I just don't know from just a common sense point of view how people could say, yeah, Ukraine should just agree not to have a military, demilitarize in response to their invader who's killing its citizens, and trust us, we will put down our weapons and never come back. That's crazy. And that's irresponsible, and it would endanger Ukrainian citizens further.
I agree. I think really what the culprit is for all of this too, that needs to be discussed more, is you have ultra nationalists on both sides of this war, right, of the civil war that's been going on, that are driving this, right? Ultra nationalists are what brought us to the place that we are in today. And this is a global problem. It's not just with, Azov Battalion. Azov Battalion gets discussed a lot because media has access to them. I've mentioned this before. I have filmed guys here in California, Nazis here in California, that have Azov Battalion tattoos that went there and trained with them back in, 2014 when the coup was. So nobody is saying this isn't a problem. It absolutely is a problem, but it isn't the only problem, and no group is monolithic in its beliefs. There are also neo-Nazis on the Russian side. That's not up for debate, but it doesn't get discussed. I mean, the Black Hunter guys he's got a Hitler tattoo on his arm. He's been fighting in the Russian separatist side this entire time. That gets very little discussion.
I have a secret. I have a secret, Tina.
Uh-oh.
But it's only between you and us. We can't tell anyone else. The United States military has a Nazi problem.
Yeah, we absolutely do. That's the other thing. I find it remarkable that people don't understand that. I mean, the armed forces, just look into this. I've come across many white supremacists in the armed forces. San Diego, for example, there's some of the guys down there. Different discussion for a different day. But yeah, there are neo-Nazis everywhere, folks. Every country has neo-Nazis. The unfortunate reality is there is a wave of ultranationalism that has been sweeping the world for the last, 7 or 8 years and increasing. I think Trump absolutely did make that worse. It pulled sort of the Band-Aid off, or the mask off. So they feel very emboldened right now to discuss what they want to publicly and not be ashamed of it. So, it's not just the United States, it's everywhere. Fascism is on the rise. So I think it's really dangerous to not recognize that and to play team sports when there's fascist problems on both sides. Like either we realize what the common denominator is here and look at ways to mitigate that, or what are we doing?
Like we said, we're both, I don't say okay, but both say fine to these things, to these concessions by Ukraine to end the war. But you cannot
ask them to demilitarize.
You understand what the offer is. Hey, we are invading and killing your people actively. For us to stop, you need to cease to have a military. You need to literally have no defense system for your country. That literally is suicide for any government, Ukraine or any government. So you could say Russia has legitimate concerns about another country right on its border, right on its doorstep, joining NATO or joining the European Union. I agree with that. You could say whatever, Crimea was annexed with Russia. Ukraine should just bite the bullet and accept that. The separatist regions, whatever, agree to that and just draw a line where the new boundaries are between Ukraine and these other regions. But you're saying yeah, Ukraine, just tell your invader, yeah, we'll literally close up shop. We don't need a military. Who's to stop Putin from coming back in a year?
Exactly.
In 2, I mean, that you're literally, that's not ending the war. That's basically giving your country over to Russia, and with no guarantee that Russia is not going to come back when you have no military. When you have no military.
I agree. It's crazy. It's an unreasonable demand, and it's not. Nobody's going to agree to that. So, and partially you have to sort of recognize that Putin realizes that on some level. Nobody is going to say, no, yeah, we're going to get rid of our military. No country. That's just not reasonable.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.